Three, two, one. All right, welcome back to another edition of the BBK podcast. This is your host, Brian Bullock, and with me today I have a couple of Boston guys, I guess. I guess we can go into that a little bit. It's kind of like more of an impromptu podcast because I normally these days it's a lot of Seth Byrne with the NFL, but I wanted to get some NBA in because just because I wanted to,
Mix it up a little bit.
hang out and mix it up a little bit. So you guys know Kevin already from previous podcasts, but the other guy here you see is the man known as Jim Sebow on Twitter, at Jim Sebow. How you doing today, guys?
Happy to be here, Brian.
Glad to have you guys.
I can't believe you invited me back, but I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. The last one was probably last playoffs, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the one time I said don't bet the Bucks, and they actually won it. So that tracks.
Sounds about right.
If you timestamp my podcast like 2 years off, then you would have been printing money.
Well, thanks for coming back, Kevin, and thanks for joining Jim. We're gonna, since you're new to the podcast, everyone who has listened for the past like 8 years or so, on and off, knows every new guest. I try to give them a little introduction so they can show how their degeneracy began, like what got you into betting, your gambling roots, memorable betting moments, favorite sports to bet, things like that. So feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah. I guess, I always liked sports from when I was like 8 years old. I feel like everybody's story here is the same. And then I was like 14 years old running a March Madness pool, carrying around a binder full of brackets in like middle school and being that guy and caring way too much about it. And then like the day after my 19th birthday in college, I was like, I probably just Googled like sports betting and opened a 5 Dimes account and put like $30 into it and was like betting $1 parlays and shit. I was like, this is sick. And then basically over the last, 13 years, that's gone from having no idea what I was doing to like having a job and having more money and still having no idea what I was doing to like starting to sort of figure out like, okay, like there's a smarter way to go about this. Not like an end boss or anything like that, I wouldn't say, but I think I've done it for a while pretty well. At least I think so. Yeah, that's super vague. I guess the other thing people who listen to this might connect to, a big thing for me was just reading Vegas Watch and like the associated fucking Seville blogs back in the day. Both in terms of finding people on the internet to talk to about this stuff and realizing that there are other people out there who are trying to think about it in a more intelligent way, especially before when it was a little bit more underground, before the ridiculous proliferation of everything associated with the legal industry in the last 4 years now, where it's everywhere. Yeah, it was pretty boring, but it's kind of.
No, I feel like you, I'll add to it. Because I've known Jim for a while now. I feel like you were one of the people that would talk about like Vinnies and locals and like skins the most, right? So that had to be like, you figured that stuff out. Where like a lot of people were just like, and even just the Vegas Watch and stuff, and the Groovins were talking about Bovada on the Strip and like different ways to bet. I do remember being like, who the fuck is Vinny? Like, I don't understand what had to like use context clues. And if you are listening to this and don't know, it's like a local bookmaker, but as opposed to Penny. But I think you were definitely one of the people that I remember tweeting about that earlier.
Yeah, I got lucky with a couple of credit outs where I went from just like a guy I was betting at $50 to, he was like, I can help you get down like legitimate amounts of money, at least legitimate for like what I was trying to get at the time. I forget who said Vinny first. I don't know where it came from, but then it really just became.
It works great. It's awesome.
Yeah, it does work
because it's
great,
like it sounds like an Italian person. It's really good. Like it really.
Yeah. It just became a way for me to just make fun of a guy who I bet with a good amount without him seeing his name. I don't even know if he follows me or not, but yeah, I guess I've seen that around a little bit more the last bit of time here.
It seems to be more common knowledge, I think.
Yeah, now the PPH thing has gone insane. Both I feel like a couple years ago, there were 5 million skins everywhere. Now they're starting to disappear a little bit harder to get. More people betting legally. They're still definitely out there though.
And
A
then,
lot.
yeah, you get them,
Yeah.
and then you have the people who consolidate all of them, and then get your account whacked.
Yeah,
the
and
second.
that's that, and then they move on somewhere else.
Yeah, the only one that I like know by name was Blind Capper. If you guys remember him
Yeah.
from the Twitter heyday.
I do remember Blind Capper.
Was he a
yeah.
was he a bookie?
Yeah.
Okay, that checks out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an OG. That's like an old name, like
Yeah.
2011.
We've been doing this just like a long time. Actually, now when you said Vegas Watch, I was like, man, that was a long
Dude,
time
like
ago.
Vegas Watch blogs getting posted on like OG Deadspin. Like when
Was
they
that
were
like
just
2015, 2014?
wait, dude, I'm talking like 09, 2010. Like way
Oh,
back
oh,
then.
yeah.
Throwbacks. I mean,
Glockner used to retweet
yeah,
him. Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
These
Glockner's had like
boys.
6 jobs, and like 6 different professions since then too. It's even crazier.
Yeah, Jim and I have been running the same, for better or worse, Twitter circles.
Yeah, we met I don't know, like 6, 7 years.
Yeah,
probably.
we actually, and have some, like a very common New England thing is to have like know someone who's friends with both of you. So we,
IRL mutuals,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, have you
AFK
guys-
mutuals?
Have you guys met in real life?
No.
no, actually,
Somehow, some way, no.
no.
Wait, have we?
I think you went down towards the city when I was coming back to Boston the most, and because you were down around the Big Apple for a while, right? And then
Yeah, still there, at least for now.
I was say I'm trying to keep everything vague. Well, Big Apple's not that vague. That's pretty specific.
fine.
Big fruit, I guess we'll call it. Just really try and keep some OPSEC here. Yeah, and then because when I go back home, I'm always going to the New England area. And then I missed a couple opportunities to see Jim and a couple other people in the last year. But I do the best part is I always get a picture from my buddies when they're with
Nice.
him. Like Egg Pete was out there, my guy. Said
Love
he had a
Egg.
great time in Vegas with you and stuff. And
That was fun.
I heard Bet Bash was also a really good time. Well, the tertiary pieces of it were definitely
Associated parts of it, right?
Yeah. It was like there were good people in town, I guess.
Yeah.
It definitely
seemed
that was
like
definitely the case at the Jersey one.
Yeah, it seemed like a good opportunity to make fun of people on Twitter too, like just from the
that's
pictures
what
that
I
were
did.
posted. So
Saved
that
a
was
lot
a
of
good
money.
time.
Probably a good idea.
So,
But yeah,
all right,
so we know people, never met in person, probably will someday.
Yeah.
Assuming I don't know.
Need
if
him to
Kevin,
come up for the.
dude. I know.
We'll see. We'll talk train schedule. And then we have another friend, Benny Jet.
yeah, he has a question on. Yeah, he has to question
I'm
on
gonna
here.
see him on Wednesday. So yeah,
Okay.
we talk about meeting people, so we're kind of skipping around here, but
Sure.
I didn't want to undersell Jim his gambling background, because I feel like he's one of the people that I've been following for a long time that like is tweeting about very specific, like important might be the wrong word, but like gambling stuff that like someone who is like avidly gambling is tweeting about. So like locals, what skin is hanging it, like Chris has this live line versus like Penny dealing this like during a game and stuff. So like he's one of the first people I remember that like I would have to like figure out what he was saying to make sure that I wasn't clueless a little bit.
No, it's probably
But
because I
part
was
of that
drunk
is
when I
yeah,
was reading it.
I was saying part of that is like it depended on what time of day it was too, where I was trying to translate it. But
And it's like, yeah, college football Saturday, like 7:54 p.m. It's just basically like complete stream of consciousness.
oh yeah, I was
Indecipherable nonsense.
learning how to set up like a time sensitive mute on those ones.
Smart. Anytime the Pats are playing in the playoffs,
Yeah,
So you just
some good
start
ones.
talking in exclamation marks or
Yeah.
like punctuation.
we're just saying lol or iterations of it 45 times in a row.
Yep.
If you're
Great.
watching your team get hosed on the road in game 2 of the NBA finals.
All right, that's a good
Great
segue
segue.
here. So I know like you guys guys both have the Boston background, so that was kind of one of the reasons with the Celtics going to the finals. So like when you guys when the season started, I know you guys were talking in our group thread here about like some bets that you guys have made on them. But like, what were your realistic expectations for Boston entering this year? Because I feel like they've always been like there but not quite there, and like I don't know, like as a fan, like a lot of fans sometimes have elevated expectations. Some of them are like completely in the dumps about their team every year. What I guess I'll start with you, Kevin. Like, what were your initial thoughts about Boston entering this year?
I liked the Udoka hire to start, but I was pretty down on the team as a whole. Like to the point, like we were playing Jabari Parker and Juancho Hernan Gomez
Dude.
lineups at one point. Like those are very bad basketball players. Like Jabari got cut from the Sacramento Kings. I don't even know how that's possible to get cut from the Sacramento Kings. And he's like playing 17 minutes, 18 minutes a game for your team. And it's just like, man, like it didn't end great last year. And there was a point there where I was like, at this point, maybe we just tank or just like try and flip some people for picks and like try and reset this. Because like Tatum's 24, so you have a little bit of time to like try and get timelines synced up. But I was like actually like advocating tanking at one point during the season, and then the trade deadline came around, and they moved like Enes Kanter, Josh Richardson, Dennis Schroeder, some of my least favorite players. Although I liked Schroeder at first, he like went off on his own, went rogue during the season. Wanted to get his own shots up and get like his contract money because he turned down that Lakers money, is what it seemed like. And he, the offense is brutal. The team was like fighting in press conferences after the game. I was just like miserable, right? And
Like season from hell type shit, right?
It was
Just
so
like,
bad. I was
yeah.
so tilted. It was just like funny every time they lost to Greg Monroe showing up the day of at the Minnesota Timberwolves facility. And they lost to him and like Nathan Wright. I want to say I don't even know his name. Like I would have to go Google this guy's name. It's like the 10th player on the Timberwolves scored like 30 points.
Like the 437th player in the league out of like however many there are.
It was crazy how bad.
15, 450.
And then there was all the COVID stuff. So like the whole like up until January, I was like, this team is going nowhere. Like brutal. Maybe see what we get for Jalen at some point, and just try and like add some stuff around Tatum. And like the trade deadline, 11 out of 10, like nailed every move. I'm a huge Derek White guy, and we'll talk a little bit about him in the models versus markets piece. And they just started winning every game by 20 points. I think like they've lost 7 total down the stretch and came and and then I think that trade deadline week, I bet them to win the division. I bet them to win the Eastern Conference. And I have a little finals exposure. Like that's how much I love the move. So I don't know that any team's ever done quite as big of a 180 mid-season without like getting a star player back or something. It was crazy.
So everyone attributed, a couple different things, right? Yeah, getting Derek White. They started playing Rob Williams, like I guess not the way you described it, I guess, is sort of like on like a tertiary player almost, so he can be more impactful as a roamer, move around the rim on defense, and that sort of helped catalyze this run. But like, I don't think that explains all of it. It's just
I don't
because
know
it's
what happened.
And obviously, like, there's a difference between being the best team in the league and like beating up on the Pistons by like 22 in January. But like in general, the more you beat teams by, the better you are. And they were just destroying teams like day in and day out for months.
Nuggets by 20.
It's ridiculous.
Timberwolves by 20. Grizz by 20.
That Sixers win, they were up like they won by like
40
45,
points,
right? Yeah, something ridiculous. So, I mean, it's kind of the most remarkable in-season turnaround. Like, and maybe a little less so when you do account for like preseason. I think there was a good amount of bullishness, right? Between everybody's hurt last year, the COVID shit, it had been weird. I guess if you projected that Rob Williams would be healthy, they would not have to be playing a less capable center. A lot
projecting
of the time.
him to be healthy is wild.
But also, which is one, and then two, you get Al Horford, and it's like, okay, the last time we saw Al Horford, it wasn't exactly going super well. He just basically took like a year off to hang out, and now he is like very much up there with anybody for the most critical player on the team.
He was not literally unplayable in Philadelphia.
Yeah, right. And they were like, well, this is the biggest mistake we've ever made. Dump him, get rid of him, and they brought him back in here from Oklahoma. So bullishness in that you have two really good two-way wings, one of whom has shown signs of being like on the lower end of like a top 10 player in the league type thing, but also some bearishness in still a lot of unknowns at a lot of spots, including who's going to play point guard, which it has been solved and it's mostly worked, but I think people are still a little.
Yeah, when it goes bad, it's real bad.
Yeah, it's
right?
so
You
bad.
saw
Dude.
Marcus's
Yeah,
game
so
2 was not
bad.
great.
I mean, it's been every fourth game in the playoffs. So, and then, but yeah, sorry, I kind of just jumped in there, but
No,
yeah,
no,
because
it's fine.
preseason, there was a lot of things to like, but there were also legitimate. It wasn't like, this could be a juggernaut. It was like if things hit, they could be like competing for a top 4 spot in the conference and probably not be in the top 2 or 3 favorites to make the finals, but still be really good. Maybe like, I don't know, 3A with Miami. I don't know, depending on how everything was modeled out. And instead they just turned into whatever they turned into, which until the Milwaukee series is like easily the best team in the East. And then I think people started changing their minds around them for a couple different reasons.
And then the thing that like everyone was victory lapping, like the early takes, like I told you, like this was gonna happen, and it's like, okay, but you were saying that when, like I said, when like Jabari Parker and Jason Richard were getting minutes, like that's, I don't know. And to your point, like it's not just specifically the roster moves. There's like schematic moves. They move Rob to like the non-shooter off ball and play Horford at point of attack, and there were they were switching everything to start, and then they started pre-switching, and like Marcus wins Defensive Player of the Year, which is one of those things, is like the best defense kind of gets Defensive Player of the Year, which is one of my favorite bets I've ever won. That was awesome. Marcus DPOY, but I think that like at some point something clicked, like schematically too, with the coach, and they've done articles about it where he kind of, it's a first year coach too, so yeah, it takes a while for him to like figure out, first year head coach, excuse me, to like really get into the flow of things. But like once it clicked, I just remember being like, well, I can shut this game off in the third quarter regularly, like
20 times since February.
Yeah.
Right? Between February and the end of the regular season.
I remember seeing that Brooklyn Boston price and being like, well, that's wrong. That's just couldn't be even like, I felt like I was missing something with how wrong it felt.
So yeah, so like the first 3 series, do you like you? I think you guys had mentioned you guys bet on them all 3, or at least one of you guys said you were betting each series. Is that you, Kevin?
I've had them in each series as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, was that more of like was that more of you guys saying this was mispriced, like you guys like taking gambling seriously like you normally do, or is there any like homerism in it?
That actually wasn't homerism for me, but I'm also not quite as big a fan as Kevin. But so I will say too, though, I'm not originating my own NBA like on my own. So, but I talk to people and work with people who do a pretty good job on that front, and I think I can get an edge there. Just not maybe like the day in day out. I mean, I bet NBA during the year too, but it's not like my main focus.
Okay.
But yeah, I also wanted to clear that up just because.
I mean, it is. Like the fan thing for me was almost work, because like I felt like I was too bullish on them, and like maybe, and it always happens like when Spoon came on here and talked about the Toronto over Cavs series bets that we both have, because like we were like, this is it, this is the year, like numbers look good, and then to a certain extent, like playoff basketball is significantly different than regular season. So I was a little worried that like, and then Rob Williams was out, and like the line, like the actual player impact numbers that I'll look at and use, and then the team level stuff, like I didn't know how it was factoring his loss in and if it was correct. So I really second guessed it and probably should have like over bet or like bet more than I did. So like being a fan actually
you underbet it, right?
I underbet it because I was like, maybe I am being too big of a fan, and like I could talk myself because of how much I watch them, and like, and Jim same way, like he knew like the Rob scheme change and all that stuff. Like you can talk yourself into ways for them to fix it, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen or anything like that. So I definitely like underbet probably relative to what the numbers I use say, and it doesn't like haunt me or anything. Like I said, I had some of the East for them to win the Eastern Conference from like back at the trade deadline and stuff. So overall, fine with it. But I think like they are a very weird case, and it kind of segues into this model versus market piece where like they have all these pieces, but is the game between regular season and playoffs like too different for them, and does that like penalize them?
And that series that Kevin was talking about, right? 2018 Cavs Raptors. The Cavs were just a complete mess for the entire year. They made that trade at the trade deadline. They got a little bit better. They got like George Hill. I forget who else they brought in. They shipped a couple guys out who weren't working. The Raptors were the 1 seed. They had been the better team all year. And I think they were like minus 180 or whatever against the Cavs. Noted, definitely former, still somewhat current NBA sharp and or whale, JT Spoon himself put up like a 50K ticket on the Raptors for that series. And was just basically shit talking the Cavs all the time. I was on the Raptors too, for what it's worth, and then LeBron just destroyed them.
Destroyed. I mean,
like the
Casey came out with CJ Miles on LeBron James one game. That I think it was like game 3. And I was like, well, that's the advantage that I'm missing right there.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's guys who really understand how things change in the playoffs as a coach, right? And maybe from like a roster deployment perspective, and then there's guys that don't. But also, I mean, game 2, LeBron literally hit like the craziest barrage of jumpers you're ever going to see in your entire life.
He was like spinning the ball in his hand before he did it.
It's absolutely preposterous. I'll tweet out the link to it later because I watch it every couple months.
Spoon's going to kill me for bringing that up because it came up on his podcast, which this is not a shot at him. I am
me neither. Hey, I love Spoon.
Noted.
It's just hilarious.
Spoon advocate. I will bury the hatchet. We're very mean to each other online. He's the best though. Like great guy. So I wasn't bringing that up to spite him. I was just saying that like that was an example off the top of my head, or like, and we'll probably bring it up when we talk about 538. Like very heavy Rockets exposure against the Warriors that year.
2018.
Yeah. And that Rockets team was insane. So good. But then like style of play, and then Chris Paul's made of silly putty and popsicle sticks and like whatever. But it was just what I was thinking of a series where like the style of play between regular season and playoffs like has a significant gap in what you would use for like model numbers that I have seen at least, or like are most common, right? And that was a big fear of mine with the Nets. It's like, this is great, and like if the Celtics are pretty much top to bottom a better team, but then like if KD goes for 50, KD goes for 50. That's it. Like there's nothing you do there. Like and Kyrie really did it in game 1. Like I think he hit like 4 threes in that quarter. Like it came down to a buzzer beater, and it's like you can model their impacts on offense and defense as much as you want, but like shot making is probably like the biggest gap in some of these player impact stuff.
When you're right at the very, very top of the like elite level, especially on the offensive end there for shot, like you just said, shot making, it feels like you almost undersell the impact of certain players and potentially oversell the impact of other players who are seen as comparable, but provide their value in a little bit different ways than pure shot making. In
like a Kyle Lowry.
Literally, exactly. I think that's a really good example. And it's not like he's a slouch shooting, but he's just not the same. He's just not the same, right? Models versus markets, right? So where else do you want to go with that, Brian?
So I mean, I'm gonna skip that. There's a question between, but I'm not as interested in that as anymore as now. So we'll go to the models versus market. So basically, what I was going with that one, because I, not being a guy who like bets a lot or does models or anything like that, I was very fascinated. I think it was Samir posted like a list of all of the different models that he could find. I don't know what his how he found all of them, but there was just like an abnormal amount that had Boston favorite. Now, granted, some of them borderline on ridiculousness, percentage wise. But the fact that there was like so many different models, and then you just looking at the line, just looking at the series line and seeing like, I don't remember what it was. Was it minus 150? I don't remember what range it was for Golden State, but it was a very significant gap between the market and the model. So, I just kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on that. I don't know who has more insight on that or who wants to start, but I was just curious to see what your guys' thoughts and like how you think that came to be, and if you even agree with maybe that perception that Boston should have been favorite.
So I've seen a lot of those tweets talking about like wrong team favored and everything like that. And yeah, it's, the 5-3-8 one is kind of ridiculous. I'm kind of sick of talking about it. I think everybody has like got their shot in at them at this
Nate
point.
Silver swimming in it now.
Yeah, it's,
All the
it's
money.
just like, it's like whatever, man. Some of them, some more are somewhat more respected, I think, by the general like discourse-based models, though, had them as pretty significant favorites. And without looking into them super closely, and Kevin, you could probably expand on this, like it just seems like the Celtics were like statistically ridiculously dominant for most of the most of the calendar year, and roll with what you could call pretty much 7 like neutral to positive value players on both ends of the court. Maybe not all 7 of them on offense at all times, but it's pretty close. And then the Warriors come in with one player coming off of a 2.5-year absence at this. What did we at 3? He literally hasn't played playoff basketball in 3 years, barely played since like before 2022. And he's seen as like one of their core contributors. So you can imagine why that might have an impact on where GSW is getting rated at. And then for most of the regular season, they just weren't. If you're training everything on regular season data, they just weren't quite at that level. They were only minus. What were they over the Mavs? They were like minus like 220, minus 210.
Yeah.
So nothing. Over the Nuggets in round 1, same thing. They were like minus 220 against Jokic and his like laying it with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Steph's numbers were down, and Steph is like, the alpha and the omega of this team. Then they were down a little bit from like insane supernova levels to just like normal, like all NBA levels over a lot of
shooting 37%.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like, sorry for the screen. Sorry if I'm giving you guys like vertigo. This screen's all messed up. Okay. But yeah, anyway, I'll let you go, Kevin, because you probably have a
No, I think like that captures a lot. One point you made there is like the injury stuff for Golden State. And so the way I mentioned on this podcast every time, but there's a great old Nylon Calculus article that talks about different ways to model or like originate basketball. And one of them is like bottom up and one of them is top down. So top down being you take team ratings and use team level data and stuff.
This is that Will.
Yeah.
Will Guo. Yeah. This like how I learned. We should tweet this one out too. Actually, it's a really good article. I remember reading this whenever it came out. Like I was like at my old job in insurance. Like, whoa, holy shit.
Yeah, you guys. I'd say reply. Like if you guys want to reply. In the.
I'll make a list of this shit. Yeah.
Go ahead. And I if anyone's ever listened to like me talk about that, is like that was the clearest way for me to understand different ways to come to a number that makes sense to gauge your estimation versus market prices, right?
Yep.
And he does a really clear, concise job of doing it. Talks about different ways that you could beat the market, even though it's like a fairly strong predictive indicator. All stuff is very good. So top down is going to be team level stuff. And to Jim's point, Boston, like team level stuff is usually going to be predicated around margin of victory. Boston had been blowing the doors off of everybody. Yep. So even if you schedule adjust, they're beating teams like the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, Grizzly. Like Grizzly, probably the second highest team level ratings you'll see schedule adjusted for the full season, because they were also, I think they beat Oklahoma City by 72 or something. Or were up at some point by 70. One of the biggest wins in NBA history, right? So if you're using team level stuff, Boston has that margin of victory boost. And that's a good data point.
There's signal in winning that big.
Right.
It's not like fully deterministic necessarily.
Exactly. And then so Boston's going to have, because Draymond's out, and then Steph goes out against Boston, actually, funny enough. And they kind of limp to the finish. And if you look at like the first few weeks and use that as like your target point, you probably have a little better indicator of what, but that's not a big enough sample size. And then, so that segues into, from a sample size perspective, most bottom up models, so player level models, you figure out what they're worth. You try and estimate minutes, how many minutes they play, and then kind of get an idea of how fast or slow the game is, and you create like your own price, right? And it's one way to do it. And most good predictive player models are multi-season, and multi-season, and they'll be weighted more towards more recent play versus longer play. So like if you use like Kostas Darko, he uses players' entire career, but like their game one is weighted super light, and their, you know, the most recent game is weighted heavy. And when you have guys like Curry, Draymond, and Clay that have had significant time off, those player impact numbers get messy. So you don't have as many possessions. The weightings handled differently across different models, and it's not even like, what was it, 2 years ago? Golden State tanked, I think, last
Yeah.
yeah 2 years
No,
ago.
yeah, Steph played 5 games.
Steph
2
played
years
5
ago.
games, right? And
Yeah.
then the team's bad. And so what those stats try to do is attribute your team's success or failure to individual players. And if they're bad, most teams, most players on the team are going to have bad ratings. And Steph wasn't on the court. That still hurts you if you don't have a ton of possessions played. And this isn't the same for every single one. There's like impact stats that use box scores more versus just pure on off over a long period of time. But the short of that is that it's just not probably capturing levels of play of some of those players as well as it is for Boston. So Boston, I think, has a lot of those guys that Jim was talking about that are like super, super impactful, especially on the defensive end, may not bring quite as much value on the offensive end. Like if you look at any player rating model, Derek White is going to be significantly higher than Klay Thompson. And I think if you talk to the average fan, they'll laugh in your face. Like, that's crazy. And I don't even know that I think that's wrong. That one is significantly, like, I think Derek White is probably better at this point. Just, and this is not a slight at Klay, it's just his whole leg exploded, right? But you know, what is the value of defense versus offense, and what is the value of someone who can score 37 points in a quarter, right? Or like you have to chase him. Like Golden State can just leave
That's the
Derek
thing.
White from
Yeah.
3, and then you have to chase Clay and be on him no matter what at all times, right? And so they have Clay, Jordan Poole, and Steph who are all like that. And while their impact numbers aren't going to be as high as a Derek White or as high as an Al Horford, right? It's just a different impact that isn't measured as well right now. So I
They
think
kind of amplify each other,
right.
especially when, you know, so again, and I don't really know, I won't like proclaim to like no ball, but the idea is that, I mean, especially in that offense, when both of them are always, let alone also throwing Jordan Poole in the mix, doing something on offense, there's just so much you have to account for as a defender. And I mean, Clay's also always been kind of, I mean, to the common eye, like super undersold by like quote unquote impact metrics, right?
Yeah.
Like his BPM was always like way below what you'd expect for a player of like that like stature and alleged caliber.
I got into a fight with Preston Sports
Yeah.
Cheetah over saying Joe Harris is better than Klay Thompson.
Yeah,
And we had a whole WNBA bet off because of it. So
I remember that.
yeah, it like they've always suppressed it out. And like there's probably truth to both sides of like him maybe being a little overrated versus like the stats not capturing certain things. But like if you're going to look at models, so if you look at Raptor, so 538, what we talked about was, and it's way off and it's like laughable. And Nate Silver has said as much. Like he's like, we don't shorten rotations for the playoffs. We don't do this. Like there's a lot where they have admitted to not really caring about it. So it's fine. It shouldn't be treated as such, but like one of their big misses is going to be like, they're going to have Derek White down as like I think Raptor has him as like a +4-ish, you know, it's like -3-ish to 7 is probably your full scale, where like 7 is like, and maybe even a touch higher is like a prime LeBron or prime Steph, right? And they have him at like Derek White is like an all NBA player, borderline all NBA player as an impact metric. And like you tally all those up, and like maybe if you miss on one player, you're not going to be significantly off market. But if you miss on Clay and him and Steph because of injury, and then you know, you have Horford super high because he's always on the floor for good defense, right? And is on off, like once you add it up, you're looking, you're like, wow, Boston's going to win the series 8 out of 10 times, no problem, right? And that's the big miss, is that like even if you blend a team level and player level model, you're not getting good like a good data history for Golden State because of how weird their path to this finals has been.
Yep.
Okay. Actually, so I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna